Before the first course had been cleared, Lady Cressida Lindham realized that her mother had invited half of London to dinner so they might witness a sale conducted with crystal, candlelight, and perfect manners. Harrowdean House had never looked more gracious. That was what made the evening feel indecent. The chandeliers spilled warm light across silver forks and white damask. Tall mirrors doubled the glow until the dining room seemed made of gold. Footmen moved soundlessly along the panelled walls, each one trained to make privilege look effortless. The guests murmured of opera, parliament, and country air, while every glance returned, sooner or later, to Cressida. She sat not at her mother's side, where a beloved daughter might have been placed, but along the lower curve of the long table, visible enough to be assessed and distant enough to be reminded of her place. Lady Octavia Lindham, Countess of Harrowdean, had arranged it with her usual elegance. She arranged flowers, seating, creditors, and daughters with the same cool hand. Cressida has never been one for display, Lady Octavia said, her voice carrying softly beneath the clink of porcelain. She has always understood that a lady's finest virtue is restraint. A few guests nodded. One matron smiled as though restraint were a compliment and not the name society gave to a woman who had learned that speaking only gave others more to use against her. Cressida lowered her eyes to her plate. She had been trained not to flinch. She had been trained not to blush. She had been trained to look grateful when the room discussed her as if she were not present. Across from her sat Lord Felix Draycott, Viscount Draycott, handsome in a manner that seemed polished rather than born. His fair hair was arranged with careless precision. His smile held the mild boredom of a man who had never doubted that doors would open when he approached. He had looked at Cressida 3 times since taking his seat. First at her gown. Then at her hands. Then at her mother, as if confirming that the article presented matched the description promised. Restraint is rare, Lord Draycott said. London has grown fond of young ladies who mistake noise for character. Lady Octavia's smile deepened. You will find my daughter very peaceful. A small laugh moved near the candles. Not loud enough to rebuke. Not kind enough to forget. Cressida felt it settle against her skin. Peaceful. That was one word for a woman whose wishes had been pressed flat over years. Useful was another. She folded her gloved hands in her lap and felt the left glove pull slightly at the seam. The kid was old, though carefully cleaned. Her mother had noticed, of course. Lady Octavia noticed everything that might reflect poorly upon Harrowdean, except the cruelties committed to preserve it. Near the shadowed archway that led to the library stood the gentleman introduced before dinner as Mr. Sebastian Arlen. His introduction had been vague enough to be purposeful. A family connection. A gentleman concerned with some estate matter. A man of reduced appearance, though not common. He had not been seated among the guests. He wore a plain dark coat, unadorned and severe. His cravat was tied without flourish. His right hand remained gloved even indoors, the leather drawn close and dark against his wrist, while his left hand rested at his side with a stillness too controlled for a man accustomed to being overlooked. Cressida had noticed him because she noticed all exits and all silences. Mr. Arlen did not fidget like a dependent gentleman hoping to be remembered. He stood as though standing aside were a choice, not a condition. Once, only once, his gaze had met hers. It held no pity. That was why it unsettled her. Lady Cressida, Lord Draycott said suddenly, drawing the room's attention toward her with the ease of a man pulling a ribbon from a box. Your mother tells me you are devoted to family duty. Cressida lifted her eyes. My mother values devotion highly, my lord. And you? I have had many opportunities to understand its cost. A knife touched porcelain too sharply. The room did not fall silent all at once. It tightened. Lady Octavia's smile did not change, but Cressida felt the warning travel down the table before her mother's hand moved beneath it. Fingers closed around Cressida's wrist, hidden by linen and candle shadow. The pressure was discreet. Maternal, if anyone had seen. Corrective, if anyone had understood. The edge of Lady Octavia's ring caught the worn seam of Cressida's glove. A tiny tearing sound passed between them. Small. Almost nothing. To Cressida, it seemed louder than the footman, louder than the guests, louder than Lord Draycott's soft laugh. Her glove opened by less than 2 inches at the wrist, exposing a narrow line of skin. Lady Octavia released her at once. Too late. Cressida folded her hands again, hiding the damage. When she glanced toward the library archway, Mr. Arlen was looking at the torn glove. Not at the Countess. Not at Lord Draycott. Not at the pretty ruin of the evening. At the glove. His expression did not change, yet something in him became utterly still. For one humiliating second, Cressida felt seen. Not admired. Not chosen. Seen. That is a thoughtful answer, Lord Draycott said. Though perhaps a little grave for dinner. Cressida grows grave when she is tired, Lady Octavia said. It is a family failing. I'm not tired, Mamma, Cressida said. The words escaped quietly, but they escaped. Lady Octavia turned her head. Cressida heard several guests pause without admitting they listened. Lord Draycott's smile sharpened by a fraction. Then perhaps you are spirited. No, Lady Octavia said smoothly. Merely unguarded. Cressida looked down. She had survived Harrowdean House by learning when not to spend herself. Tonight, however, something inside her refused to return entirely to its corner. A guarded life is not always a safe one, she said. The room changed. Even the candles seemed to hold still. Lady Octavia's eyes brightened with a warning so polished it might have passed for affection. Cressida, she said, you forget yourself. There it was. The old command. Forget the thought. Forget the wound. Forget the person underneath the daughter. Cressida inclined her head. Forgive me, Mamma. The words tasted like cool tea. Dinner resumed because society preferred discomfort to disappear under conversation. A lady praised the sauce. A gentleman spoke of the roads to Bath. Lord Draycott addressed Lady Octavia about country houses, jointures, and the virtues of order. Cressida listened while her own future was circled with polite phrases. She heard enough to understand that her dowry had become more interesting than her consent. She heard Harrowdean's creditors mentioned once in a tone so careful that it could only mean danger. She heard Lord Draycott say, a wife should not be left to imagine herself independent of the house that protects her. Lady Octavia answered, my daughter has been raised to understand protection. At the archway, Mr. Arlen's gloved right hand closed slowly at his side. After dinner, the ladies withdrew to the drawing room, where the fire burned low and the air smelled of roses forced too early into bloom. Cressida stood near the pianoforte because no one expected her to play and no one could accuse her of hiding. Lady Octavia crossed to her while the older women settled with their tea. You will not answer Lord Draycott in that manner again, she said, so softly that the words might have been a blessing. He is not a man who appreciates contradiction. Has he asked for my appreciation? Cressida asked. Her mother's gaze hardened. He will call tomorrow. You will receive him with gratitude. Cressida felt the torn seam of her glove brush her wrist. Has he offered? He will. And if I do not wish to accept? Lady Octavia's smile returned, cold and perfect. You mistake wishes for resources. You have none. Before Cressida could answer, Lord Draycott entered the drawing room earlier than custom allowed and crossed toward her as if permission had already been granted. Lady Cressida, he said, offering his arm. Your mother tells me the gallery is fine by candlelight. You must show it to me. A private corridor. A closed door. Another courtesy shaped like a command. Cressida opened her mouth, but a quiet voice spoke behind him. I fear the gallery door has been locked for the evening. Lord Draycott turned. Mr. Sebastian Arlen stood near the threshold with a book in his left hand and his right hand still gloved. Locked? Draycott said. By whose instruction? Mine, my lord, Mr. Arlen replied. A draught was reported near the east windows. Lady Harrowdean would not wish a guest to take cold. It was a mild answer. Almost deferential. Yet he did not move. Lord Draycott studied him with sudden dislike. You are attentive for a man no one expected to see tonight. Unexpected rooms often require attention, Mr. Arlen said. Lady Octavia approached, smiling like silk drawn over steel. Mr. Arlen, how considerate. Though Lord Draycott needs no guidance in my house. No, my lady. Only the locked door did. The words were nothing. The effect was everything. Draycott could not insist without making the impropriety visible. Lady Octavia could not object without admitting what she had intended. For the first time that evening, her mother lost a move. Cressida remained in the room. Mr. Arlen did not look triumphant. He simply stepped back into the edge of the firelight, where plain men were meant to vanish. He did not vanish. His gaze touched the torn edge of her glove once more, then lifted to her face with a question he did not speak. "How long has this been happening?" Cressida looked away before gratitude could show. Lady Octavia's voice cut softly through the room. "Come, Cressida. You have had quite enough excitement." Cressida followed because every eye had turned and rebellion sometimes had to survive by breathing quietly first. At the door, her mother leaned close enough that only she could hear. "By tomorrow evening, you will be promised." Cressida did not sleep after her mother promised her future as though announcing the next day's weather. She sat beside the low fire in her chamber with the torn glove spread across her lap, watching the split seam gape open at the wrist like a small, honest mouth. Harrowdean House had settled into its midnight silence, the kind that made every cruelty of the day seem impossible by morning. Doors closed softly. Footsteps faded. Somewhere below, a footman banked the fires in rooms where men had spoken of duty, debt, and daughters as if none of those words could bleed. Mrs. Vale slept in the chair near the dressing screen, a shawl around her shoulders, her cap slightly crooked, her loyalty still awake in the lines of her face. Cressida envied her the mercy of exhaustion. Her own mind returned again and again to Lady Octavia's whisper. "By tomorrow evening, you will be promised." Not asked. Not courted. Promised. The word moved through her like a key turning in a lock. She rose before dawn because remaining still had become another form of obedience. Without ringing for her maid, she dressed in a plain grey wool gown and chose a dark cloak, not the prettiest, but the warmest and least memorable. She took a small reticule, the few coins she had saved from ribbon money, and the torn glove. She should have left the glove behind. Instead, she folded it carefully and placed it inside the reticule as though a damaged thing might still serve as witness. When she opened her chamber door, voices below made her stop. They came from the small blue parlor near the back stairs, low enough to be secret and clear enough to be unforgivable. "You should not have tried to take her to the gallery," Lady Octavia said. "A cornered girl may become dramatic if she is given a corridor in which to perform." Lord Draycott laughed softly. "My dear Lady Harrowdean, I merely wish to discover whether the lady has a will of her own before I acquire the task of managing it." Cressida's hand closed around the banister. "Acquire. Task. Managing." The words did not shout. They did not need to. "Cressida has nerves," Lady Octavia replied. "Not will. Her father encouraged in her a sentimental idea of conscience, and I have spent years correcting it." The mention of her father entered Cressida like cold water. Her father, who had once told her that dignity could protect a woman when affection failed. Her mother had taken the lesson and turned it into silence. Draycott's voice changed, losing its idle Polish. "Let us speak plainly. I will not announce a betrothal only to discover that Harrowdean's creditors expect my patience before they have secured her portion. You will receive what was agreed. Through the settlement. Through the marriage," Lady Octavia said. "Once Cressida is Viscountess Draycott, objections will look unfilial and foolish. She will not oppose what she does not fully understand. And if she imagines herself wronged, then you must teach her not to imagine doors where none exist." The sentence did not frighten Cressida in the way a raised voice might have done. It steadied her. Some truths are so cruel that they become lanterns. She returned to her chamber, crossed to Mrs. Vale, and touched her shoulder. The older woman woke at once. "My lady, I need your bonnet, your courage, and no questions until we are outside." Mrs. Vale looked at the cloak, the reticule, and Cressida's face. She asked no questions. "Then I shall bring all three." They moved with the quiet skill of women who had spent their lives avoiding notice in houses that depended upon noticing everything. At the servants' stair, a young scullery maid carrying kindling saw them and froze. Cressida met her eyes. The girl looked down and continued walking, choosing mercy by pretending blindness. Cressida would remember that. At the side entrance, Mrs. Vale lifted the heavy bolt with both hands, and cold air slipped into the passage. London before sunrise was damp, grey, and mercifully unfinished. The mews behind Harrowdean House lay almost empty, except for the soft stamp of a horse and the distant rattle of wheels over stone. Cressida stepped outside without looking back. She had expected panic. Instead, she felt a terrible lightness, as though the house had been holding its breath inside her ribs and had finally let go. They had gone no more than a quarter of a mile when a groom's voice called from behind them. "Lady Cressida?" Mrs. Vale caught her arm. Another voice answered, then the slam of a door echoed through the morning lane. "This way," Mrs. Vale whispered, guiding her toward a narrower passage that led behind a row of townhouses and down toward a small parish chapel Cressida remembered from childhood walks with her father. The chapel courtyard sat behind a low iron gate, its stones slick with mist, its two bare plane trees holding their branches like hands too tired to pray. Cressida pushed through the gate. A man stepped from the shadow beside the chapel wall. Mrs. Vale gasped and moved in front of her. Cressida knew him before the light fully touched his face. Mr. Sebastian Arlen. He removed his hat. His right hand remained gloved. Lady Cressida. She should have been frightened. Instead, she was irritated that some part of her felt relief. "Are you following me, Mr. Arlen?" At a distance, he said. And only because Lord Drakett's groom was waiting near the rear lane before dawn. "I did not like it." Mrs. Vale lifted her chin. "That is a convenient explanation, sir. It is also true." His gaze moved to Cressida's reticule, then to the torn glove partly visible within it. Something tightened in his face, controlled too quickly to be called expression. "Did he threaten you?" "Not in words society would punish. That is often where dangerous men prefer to live." Behind them, voices entered the lane. Harrowdean's servants. Perhaps Drakett's groom. The sound turned Cressida's thoughts sharp. "I intended to go to my aunt in Bloomsbury," she said. "She has little money and less influence, but she has courage. I can see you to her house." "And then?" Sebastian looked toward the lane, measuring time. "Then a solicitor might help, if he can move before your mother's version of events does." "Might." "Yes." The honesty was not comforting. It was useful. Cressida drew her cloak tighter. "Do not speak to me as if you are poor one moment and connected to solicitors the next without expecting me to notice." A faint pause. "I never said I was poor. You allowed me to think it. I allowed the room to think many things last night. That does not recommend you." "No," he said. "It doesn't." The admission silenced her because it did not ask to be forgiven. The footsteps beyond the courtyard grew louder. Mrs. Vale looked from the gate to Cressida. "My lady, we cannot stand here." Sebastian opened the chapel gate wider, though he did not touch it until Cressida stepped back from him. "There is a vestry. Mrs. Vale may remain with you. No one will accuse you of impropriety while she is present. You seem very certain what people will not dare to accuse." "No. I am certain what I will not permit unchallenged." Poor gentlemen did not speak that way. Men of reduced appearance did not make the air listen. Cressida felt suspicion and need rise together, an uneasy pair. "What are my choices?" she asked. "Your aunt's house. A solicitor's protection, though it may not stop an announcement printed before noon. Or marriage." Mrs. Vale drew in a sharp breath. Cressida stared at him. "Marriage? To me? You are a stranger." "Yes." A strange man offering marriage in a chapel courtyard is not usually considered a sign of providence. Nor should it be. He held her gaze. "I have no miracle in my pocket, Lady Cressida. No license ready for any bride who happens to flee through mist. I have influence enough to move lawful papers quickly, a solicitor already awake because of urgent ecclesiastical business of my own, and a clergyman who will not proceed without hearing your consent from your own mouth. If you choose otherwise, I will take you to your aunt." The explanation was brisk, almost cold, and that made it more believable. He was not offering romance. He was offering a door that would have consequences on both sides. "Why?" she asked. "Because Lord Draycott cannot claim a wife. Because your mother cannot sell a woman whose legal name has already changed. Because last night I saw enough. Her throat tightened. You saw a torn glove? No, he said quietly. I saw the room pretend not to. The voices reached the lane outside the gate. Someone called her name again, this time closer. Cressida thought of Lady Octavia saying she had no resources. She thought of Drake saying he would manage her will. She thought of her father's voice, softer than memory deserved, telling her that dignity was not the same as surrender. I would rather marry an honest poor man than be sold to a titled coward, she said. Sebastian's face changed by the smallest degree. Not victory. Respect. Then choose honestly. Mrs. Vale touched Cressida's sleeve. My lady, you don't have to do this. No, Cressida whispered. That is why I can. The gate rattled. Sebastian did not look away from her. If you choose this, choose it because it's yours. Cressida lifted her chin. For the first time in years, the terror inside her made room for something brighter. Then send for your solicitor, Mr. Arlen. The gate shook once, then again, and the sound passed through the chapel courtyard like a hand striking the inside of Cressida's ribs. Mr. Sebastian Arlen did not turn toward it. He kept his eyes on her, as though her answer, not the men beyond the iron bars, was the only matter with legal weight. That steadiness frightened her almost as much as it steadied her. Poor men could be brave. Poor men could be kind. But poor men did not stand in a misty courtyard while another household servants called a lady's name and speak of solicitors, clergymen, and lawful papers as if the world could be made to pause for their decision. Mr. Arlen, Mrs. Vale whispered, if you have influence enough to do what you suggest, then you are not what you appear. Very likely, he said. But I am what I have said in the only point that matters this moment. I will not proceed unless Lady Cressida chooses freely. Another voice came from the lane. One of Harrowdene's footmen, closer now. Lady Cressida, Lady Harrowdene commands you to return. The old command entered the courtyard before the man did. Lady Harrowdene commands. Cressida felt it touch her spine with years of practice behind it. Rise. Obey. Explain nothing. Apologize for the inconvenience of having a will. Sebastian stepped to the side, not in front of her. The difference was small and enormous. Your aunt's house remains a choice, he said. So does refusing me. I will not turn a locked door into a wedding ring. And if I choose marriage? Then my solicitor will bring the papers he has been empowered to secure. The license will bear our names, not a convenient blank. The clergyman will ask you plainly whether you consent. If you hesitate, it ends. Cressida searched his face. No warmth meant to persuade her. No smile. No romance laid over desperation like lace. You speak as if you have done this before. I have prevented several foolish men from using law as a net, he said. That is not the same thing. No, she said. It isn't. His mouth tightened almost imperceptibly. He accepted the rebuke. That, too, mattered. The chapel's side door opened before the gate could be forced into a louder scene. A narrow gentleman in dark clothes entered the courtyard carrying a leather folder beneath one arm. Behind him stood an elderly clergyman with white hair, anxious eyes, and the look of a man who disliked haste but disliked coercion more. The solicitor bowed first to Sebastian, then to Cressida with exact respect. Lady Cressida. I am Mr. Ives. He did not offer an invented comfort. His instructions reached me before dawn in connection with an urgent family matter already requiring ecclesiastical attention. When His Grace sent word that the names had changed, I came at once to make certain nothing proceeded unlawfully. Cressida heard the words. His Grace. They sounded strange, perhaps misapplied, perhaps borrowed. Yet Sebastian gave no correction. Instead, he looked briefly toward the gate, where the footman had gone silent. Her thought snagged on the phrase, but the clergyman stepped forward before she could seize it. My child, he said gently, I must ask what your mother may not have asked. Do you understand that marriage is binding? Yes, Cressida said. Her throat felt dry. Do you enter it because you choose it, not because this gentleman or any other person compels you? Her eyes moved to Sebastian. He did not help her. He did not nod. He did not soften his face into encouragement. The answer had to be hers, or the whole morning would become another version of Harrodine. I choose it, she said. Not because I am unafraid. Because returning would not be freedom. The clergyman studied her for one solemn second, then bowed his head. Then we shall be swift, and we shall be careful. They entered the chapel through the side door, leaving the courtyard voices dulled by stone. The little nave was cold enough that Cressida saw Mrs. Vale rub her hands together before clasping them again. No flowers waited. No guests turned with delighted faces. No mother stood with tears arranged for public admiration. There was only old wood, narrow windows, morning grey upon the altar cloth, and the faint smell of candle wax. Cressida had imagined that a wedding would feel like being watched by the world. This felt like standing where the world had been shut out and discovering that silence could be both mercy and danger. Mr. Ives placed the documents upon a small table. The papers name Sebastian Arlen and Lady Cressida Lindham, he said, looking directly at her. The license is specific. The register will be specific. There is no contrivance here that can turn another woman's name into yours, nor yours into another's. The reassurance was so oddly exact that Cressida wondered what kind of men he had served before. Sebastian stood near the altar, his right hand still gloved, his plain dark coat severe against the pale stone. He looked less like a bridegroom than a man presenting himself for judgment. This is your final moment to change your mind, he said. You may walk out with Mrs. Vale, and I will walk behind you until your aunt's door closes. And the men outside will not reach you first. Again, that impossible certainty. Cressida should have stepped away from it. Instead, she heard Draycott's voice in memory, speaking of managing her will. She heard her mother saying she had no resources. She looked down at her torn glove, then at Mrs. Vale, whose eyes shone with fear and loyalty. Stay close, Cressida said. Always, my lady. Then let it be done. The service began without music. The clergyman's voice was soft, but the old words filled the chapel with more authority than Lady Octavia had ever managed with all her commands. Sebastian spoke his vows clearly. When he said her name, he did not make it sound like an instruction. He made it sound like something placed in his care only because she had permitted him to hold it. That nearly broke her composure. Courtesy had become dangerous to her. It could feel too much like tenderness when a woman had lived too long without either. When her turn came, the first words caught. No one hurried her. No one supplied them. She began again. I, Cressida Lindham, take thee, Sebastian Arlen. His name felt unfamiliar, not false, but undiscovered. A country road in fog. A plain gold ring appeared in his palm. It was simple, almost severe, without a jewel bright enough to pretend this morning was romantic. He waited until she gave the smallest nod. Then he slid it onto her finger with care so restrained that it felt more intimate than any flourish could have done. His glove brushed her skin. The right one, dark and still concealing whatever lay beneath. The final blessing passed over them. Mrs. Vale pressed a handkerchief to her mouth and looked away. The clergyman closed his book. Outside, the voices had faded, perhaps to fetch Lady Octavia, perhaps to gather more force. Cressida stood as a married woman and felt no safer than she had 1 minute before. Only different. Different was not nothing. The register, Mr. Ives said. His voice was quiet, but the words pulled the room back from sacrament to evidence. Cressida stepped to the table. The pen felt heavy in her hand. She signed Lady Cressida Lindham with a strange ache, knowing it was both true and already past. Ink shone wetly for an instant, then began to darken. Sebastian came beside her. For the first time that morning, he hesitated. Then he removed his right glove. The motion was small. The effect was not. Gold caught the chapel's dim light. Cressida saw the ring before she saw his hand fully. Not a wedding ring. Not a gentleman's ornament. A heavy signet cut with a falcon above a shield, wings lifted in command. She knew that crest. Every daughter raised under Lady Octavia's ambitions knew such things. Westridge. The House of Westridge. A dukedom old enough to make viscounts look recently polished. The air left her lungs in silence. Sebastian signed the register. Sebastian Arlen. Then, beneath it, in the same controlled hand, he wrote Duke of Westridge. Cressida stared at the words until they blurred. His Grace. Mr. Ives had said it in the courtyard. She had heard it and not understood quickly enough. Her poor stranger was not poor. Her obscure rescuer was not obscure. Her mother had meant to force her upward into Drake's grasp, and Cressida, in defiance, had stepped unknowingly far above them all. The thought did not bring triumph. It brought a cold, ringing hurt. She had chosen, yes. But not with full sight. Sebastian turned toward her. Whatever he saw in her face made the Duke vanish and the man stand exposed. He did not reach for her. Lady Cressida. No, she said, barely above a whisper. That is not what I am now, is it? A flicker of pain moved across his face. No, Mrs. Vale looked from the ring to the register and went pale. The clergyman lowered his eyes to his book with an expression of determined privacy. Cressida looked at Sebastian's uncovered hand, at the falcon that had hidden under leather while she vowed herself to him. You are not poor. No, you are not merely Mr. Arlen. No, you let me believe I was marrying a man my mother would despise. His voice was low. I let you answer without a coronet weighing upon your throat. That is a graceful way to describe a deception. He accepted it without flinching. Yes. The honesty wounded more sharply than denial. Outside, carriage wheels scraped against the street beyond the chapel wall. Lady Octavia, perhaps, arriving too late to prevent the vows and early enough to sharpen the aftermath. Cressida looked once more at the falcon on his ring. Whole wings. Perfect feathers. A secret bright enough to blind. What have I married? She asked. Sebastian stood before her in his plain coat with his ducal signet uncovered and his defences stripped to nothing. A duke, he said quietly. And an apology. For several seconds after Sebastian's answer, the chapel held a silence too complete to be holy. Cressida heard the scrape of carriage wheels beyond the wall, the restless shift of a horse, Mrs. Vale's uneven breath, and the faint crackle of a candle near the altar. Each sound seemed ordinary. That was the cruelty of it. The world had not split open because she had married a duke by mistake, or rather, by ignorance. The register lay on the table with her old name drying beside his true one. The gold ring on her finger felt simple and cold. The signet on his hand looked impossibly bright, the Westridge falcon carved with wings lifted as if it had never known concealment. An apology, Cressida repeated. That is an elegant dowry, Your Grace. He did not wince at the title, though she saw the word strike. It is an insufficient one. Then begin with something less graceful. Sebastian looked toward Mr. Ives and the clergyman. The clergyman bowed and withdrew toward the vestry with the tact of a man who had witnessed enough human folly to know when scripture must give way to privacy. Mr. Ives remained near the door, close enough to be summoned, far enough to let the conversation belong to the newly married pair. Mrs. Vale did not move from Cressida's side. Sebastian noticed and gave the companion a respectful inclination of his head. Stay, Mrs. Vale. Her Grace should have someone present who chose her before this morning. The words landed more gently than Cressida wished. She could not afford softness yet. Do not call me that as if the title explains what you have done. It does not. Then explain it yourself. Sebastian drew the removed glove through his bare hand, then seemed to realize the motion looked like concealment and set the glove on the table beside the register. I came to Harrowdean House because Lord Drake's name has appeared too often near ruined settlements and quiet withdrawals. A gentlewoman in Bath lost most of what should have protected her after his attentions turned profitable, then inconvenient. Her guardians were ashamed. Her aunt was frightened. No one would speak loudly enough to make proof. So you came disguised. I came unannounced as a duke. That is different, though not different enough. You let my mother believe you could be ignored. Yes. You let Lord Drake speak carelessly because he thought you lacked consequence. Yes. And you let me stand beside you in this chapel while I believed I was marrying a man my mother would despise because he had no rank to use against me. His gaze did not leave hers. Yes. The third answer did not defend itself. That made it harder to throw back at him. Cressida hated him a little for not making the anger easy. Did you know my name before last night? No, then why was your solicitor already moving before dawn? Because I had empowered him for another urgent matter tied to Drakett's circle. There was a possible marriage settlement in danger, though not yours. When I sent word from the chapel courtyard, he altered nothing unlawfully. He prepared new papers with our names after your consent was given. You make it sound orderly. It was lawful. It was not orderly. A sharp sound came from the outer chapel door. Someone knocked, then tried the latch. Lady Octavia's voice followed, muffled by wood and stone. Cressida! Open this door at once. Mrs. Vale went pale. Cressida's body responded before thought could correct it. Her shoulders tightened. Her fingers sought to hide the torn glove that was no longer on her hand. Sebastian saw. His face changed, not dramatically, but with such controlled anger that the air seemed colder. He took one step toward the door, then stopped and turned back to her. Do you wish me to admit them? The question shocked her more than the knock. You ask. I should have asked more before now. Lady Octavia struck the door again, this time with the handle of a parasol or cane. Mr. Arlen, if you are in there, I demand that you release my daughter. Lord Drakett's voice came after, smooth with strain. This has gone quite far enough. Cressida looked at Sebastian. He was close enough to shield her with one movement and far enough not to claim the right. The restraint cost him. She saw that, too. Let them enter, she said. But do not speak first unless I cannot. You can. The answer was immediate. It steadied her against her will. Sebastian signaled to Mr. Ives, who opened the door. Lady Octavia entered first in a travelling cloak thrown over a morning gown too fine for haste, which meant she had intended to be seen even in outrage. Lord Drakett followed, his expression arranged into insulted concern. Both stopped when they saw the register, the clergyman's book, Cressida's ring, and Sebastian's ungloved hand. Lady Octavia noticed the signet last. When she did, the colour left her face in a delicate retreat. Drakett's stare fixed on the falcon. For one brief instant, the chapel gave Cressida a wicked gift. She saw the exact moment two people who had meant to trap her realized they had misjudged the room. Your Grace, Drakett said. The words scraped out of him. Sebastian did not answer. He looked at Cressida. Lady Octavia recovered first, because recovery had always been her finest talent. This is absurd, she said, though her voice had lost some of its velvet. Cressida, you have been frightened into a performance. Come with me. His Grace will understand that you are not yourself. I am more myself than I was at dinner, Cressida said. Her mother's eyes sharpened. You will not speak to me in that tone before witnesses. Then I am fortunate to have witnesses who can hear me clearly. Mrs. Vale made a small sound behind her, half fear, half pride. Lady Octavia's gaze moved to the wedding ring on Cressida's hand. You cannot mean to claim this arrangement as valid. Mr. Ives stepped forward. The marriage is valid, Lady Harradine. The license is proper. The register is signed. The lady's consent was requested and received in plain words before the ceremony proceeded. Consent. Lady Octavia turned the word into something childish. She was fleeing confusion. I was fleeing an arrangement you made with Lord Drakett while speaking of my portion as if it were already his, Cressida said. Drakett's mouth tightened. You overheard fragments and mistook practical concern for conspiracy. No. I heard enough practical concern to know I was the least practical thing in it. Sebastian's hand moved slightly, then stilled. He was keeping his promise. Cressida felt the room notice her because he did not take it from her. Lady Octavia stepped closer. You will regret humiliating your mother. Perhaps, Cressida said. But I would have regretted obeying her more. That struck. Not visibly to anyone who did not know Lady Octavia, but Cressida knew the small pause, the little brightening of the eyes. Her mother had not expected resistance to wear calm. Drakett looked at Sebastian. Your Grace, I cannot imagine you wish your name dragged through a scandal born of feminine panic. Sebastian's voice entered the chapel quietly. You would be wise not to finish that sentence. Drake bowed stiffly, but anger showed through the courtesy. Lady Octavia changed tactics at once. Cressida, my dear, even if this unfortunate ceremony stands, you cannot believe a great house will welcome a bride taken up in haste from a chapel courtyard. Come home. We shall determine what is best before society learns a distorted version. Home. The word reached for the old obedience and found less of it waiting. Cressida looked at the register, at the torn glove on the table, at the ducal signet that had shocked her into pain and now stood between her and being returned like misdelivered post. I am not returning to Harrowdean House. Lady Octavia's face chilled. You are my daughter. Yes. Cressida's voice softened, which made the refusal stronger. And I am married. A knock sounded from the side door. One of Harrowdean's footmen appeared, uncertain and red with cold. He held out a folded note. For Lady Cressida. From my lady. Lady Octavia's expression flickered, and Cressida understood that the note had been prepared before her mother entered. A command in reserve. Mrs. Vale took it first, then handed it to Cressida. The seal was Harrowdean's. Cressida broke it with fingers that did not tremble until after the wax split. Return home before his grace learns what sort of woman he has married. The words were short, clean, and cruel enough to reveal the hand that wrote them more fully than any signature. Cressida looked up. Lady Octavia watched her with maternal sorrow arranged across her face for the room. Drake waited for shame to do what force could not. Sebastian's eyes moved once to the note, then back to Cressida's face. He did not ask to read it. He did not ask what her mother had written. That restraint became, for one dangerous instant, more powerful than the title he had hidden. Cressida folded the note and placed it beside the torn glove. 2 witnesses now. One made by pressure. One made by ink. Your Grace, she said, turning to Sebastian with all the composure Lady Octavia had spent years teaching her for other uses, I believe your carriage is required. The Duke of Westridge's carriage arrived at the chapel door with a black lacquered precision that made every shabby corner of the morning suddenly visible. Cressida stood beneath the stone arch with Mrs. Vale at her side, her mother's note folded in her reticule beside the torn glove, and watched the footman lower the steps as if this were a customary departure after a customary wedding. Nothing in her life had been customary for the last hour. Lady Octavia remained inside the chapel, too proud to follow at once and too furious to let the scene end without memorizing every witness. Lord Drake stood a little behind her, his courtesy sharpened into something almost visible. Sebastian offered Cressida his hand. He wore the glove again, but she knew now what it concealed, and the knowledge had changed the shape of him. He was still the man who had blocked the gallery door. He was also the man who had hidden a dukedom beneath leather. You need not take my hand, he said quietly, because he had seen the hesitation before she had finished feeling it. That almost undid her. She placed her fingers in his palm anyway. Do not make every courtesy sound like repentance, she said. I shall try to make fewer mistakes requiring it. That is not the same thing. No, he said. It isn't. The carriage door closed, and for the first time since dawn, Cressida sat where her mother could not reach across a table to correct her. Mrs. Vale faced her, gripping her own reticule with both hands. Sebastian sat opposite, near enough for his presence to fill the space, far enough not to claim it. Through the window, the chapel slipped backward into the grey London morning. Cressida did not look for Lady Octavia. She feared that if she saw her mother watching, the old habit of guilt would rise and bow before she could stop it. Sebastian seemed to know that silence would serve her better than explanation. He waited until the carriage turned onto a busier street before speaking. Westridge House is in Mayfair. Mrs. Vale will have a room near yours if you wish it. You will have your own chamber, your own maid, and every letter you send or receive will be yours unless you ask me to see it. Cressida watched his face. You arrange liberty very efficiently. His mouth tightened. That sounded like command dressed properly. It did. Then I will say it differently. The house is at your disposal. I ask nothing of you that you do not choose to give. You ask me to trust a house I have never entered and a husband I did not know I was marrying. I ask you to enter only because the alternative is Harrowdean today. It was honest enough to hurt less than comfort would have done. Cressida looked down at her wedding ring. Plain gold, narrow and serious. It did not resemble triumph. Perhaps that was why she could bear it. My mother will not stop. No, Lord Draycott will make me appear foolish. He will try. And London will prefer the simplest story. Sebastian's gaze lifted. Then we must not let them be comfortable with a simple lie. Something in the word we moved through her, unwelcome and steady. She turned toward the window. The streets of Mayfair widened. Houses grew larger, with doors polished black and brass knockers bright enough to reflect the morning. Westridge House stood behind iron railings, its stone front imposing without ornament, a residence that did not need beauty to announce consequence. When the carriage stopped, the door opened almost immediately. Cressida stepped down to find the household assembled in the hall beyond the entrance, a line of servants so orderly that the silence itself seemed trained. At the center stood a tall woman with silver-threaded dark hair and a face composed by long practice. "Your Grace," she said, curtsying. "I am Mrs. Ainsworth. Westridge House is honored to receive you." "Your Grace." The title entered Cressida like a bell struck too close. Yesterday it would have belonged to another woman in another world. This morning it fell upon her shoulders before she had even removed her cloak. Every servant bowed or curtsied. No one smirked. No one looked her over as Lord Draycott had done. No one called her peaceful. Yet respect, when sudden, could feel almost as disorienting as insult. Cressida inclined her head. "Thank you, Mrs. Ainsworth." She made herself say the name. The housekeeper's eyes flickered, almost imperceptibly, as if being named mattered. A young maid near the back of the line stepped forward too quickly, a salver trembling in her hands. "A card, Your Grace." It came just as the carriage turned into the square. "Mrs." Ainsworth's expression sharpened. "Nell, this is not the moment to thrust cards at her Grace." The maid's face flushed. "I'm sorry." The messenger said it was urgent. The old reflex in Cressida recognized the shape of what would follow. A small person blamed for a large person's pressure. She turned before Mrs. Ainsworth could continue. The fault belongs to the person who used urgency as a whip, not to the hand that carried it. Nell looked up, startled. Sebastian, who had been removing his hat, went still. Mrs. Ainsworth lowered her eyes at once. "Of course, Your Grace." Cressida took the card from the salver. Lady Harrowdene's name sat in black script upon thick paper. Beneath it, in her mother's unmistakable hand, was one line. "I shall call where I am owed an explanation." Cressida felt the house watching without seeming to watch. She closed her fingers over the card. "Lady Harrowdene is owed nothing by haste," she said. "If she calls, she may be told that her Grace is not at home unless her Grace says otherwise." A faint breath moved through the hall, quickly suppressed. Sebastian's gaze rested on her with a quiet intensity that she felt more than saw. It was not possession. It was recognition. That made it more dangerous. Mrs. Ainsworth curtsied. "As you wish, Your Grace." The servants were dismissed. The hall emptied with disciplined speed, though Nell paused half a heartbeat too long, gratitude written across her young face before she remembered to hide it. Cressida looked after her. "How old is she?" 16, Mrs. Ainsworth said. "Newly taken on." "Then she is young enough to be taught without being shamed." The housekeeper's posture changed, not in resentment, but in recalculation. "Yes, Your Grace." Sebastian waited until Mrs. Ainsworth withdrew before speaking. "That mattered to you?" "No," Cressida said, still looking toward the corridor where Nell had vanished. "That is why it mattered." He understood. She saw it happen in his eyes. Before either could say more, a footman entered with another note. This one bore no Harrowdene seal. "For his Grace," he said, then hesitated. The messenger said it concerned her Grace as well. Sebastian took it, glanced at the hand, and his expression cooled. "Draycott." Cressida extended her hand. "Then I should hear it." He gave her the note without argument. That, too, she recorded. The message was brief and elegant enough to have been composed by a man admiring his own poison. Lord Draycott presents his compliments to His Grace and trusts the felicity of this morning's arrangement will withstand the interest it is certain to attract. He means to question the marriage where law cannot be reached, Cressida said. Society. Yes, Sebastian replied. He will imply you were cornered, or ambitious, or unstable. My mother will imply all three with tears in her eyes. Then do not meet them unprepared. I do not intend to hide. The word surprised them both. Cressida had meant only to resist. Instead, she had declared. Mrs. Ainsworth returned with a silver tray, upon which lay a cream-coloured invitation edged in green. From the Duchess of Lanford, Your Grace. Delivered by her own footman. Sebastian's brow lifted slightly. Lanford moves quickly. Cressida opened it. The Duchess invited their Graces of Westridge to dinner that evening, with a line beneath the formal wording in a sharp, confident hand. London will talk. It may as well do so while looking at you. For the first time that day, Cressida almost smiled. Does she always command by invitation? Sebastian's expression softened. Often. With more success than most generals. Is she kind? When deserved? That is not comforting. No. But it is useful. Cressida read the line again. London would talk whether she sat in Westridge House or entered a dining room with her head high. At Harrowdean, silence had never protected her. It had only made cruelty easier to arrange. She folded the invitation. We shall attend. Sebastian did not say that the evening would be difficult. He did not ask whether she was certain. He seemed to know that certainty had little to do with courage. Then Lanford House it is. Mrs. Ainsworth had almost reached the door when another servant appeared and murmured something in her ear. The housekeeper turned back, her face carefully blank. Your Grace, she said to Cressida, there is further word from the Duchess of Lanford's footman. Cressida's hand tightened on the invitation. Yes? Lady Harrowdean has also accepted for this evening. A pause followed, polished and cold as marble. Then Mrs. Ainsworth added, and Lord Draycott. By evening, Cressida understood that becoming a duchess did not remove a woman from judgment. It merely improved the quality of the knives. Westridge House had dressed her with care she had not requested and could not entirely resent, a gown of deep blue silk, pearl pins, gloves without a tear, and a cloak lined in soft grey fur that felt too generous for a day built from alarm. Mrs. Vale stood behind her in the mirror, fastening the last pearl at her shoulder with fingers steadier than Cressida's breath. You needn't go, my lady, the older woman said softly, then corrected herself with a small shake of the head. Your Grace. Cressida looked at the woman in the glass. The title still seemed to belong to the gown, not to the person inside it. If I do not go, my mother will tell London I am hidden because I am ashamed. And if you do? She will try to make me ashamed in public. Mrs. Vale's mouth tightened. Then may she find the work harder than expected. That was nearly a blessing. Cressida carried it downstairs. Sebastian waited in the hall wearing black evening dress so severe it made every candle appear frivolous. His signet ring was visible now, the falcon no longer hidden beneath leather. Her eyes went to it before she could stop them. He noticed, of course. He seemed to notice every wound before she had decided whether to name it. Would you prefer I wear a glove? He asked. No, the answer came more quickly than she expected. Let them see what they misjudged. He inclined his head, but did not smile. Then they shall. In the carriage to Lanford House, he gave no lecture on whom she must charm, whom she must avoid, or when she must speak. That restraint filled the space between them more loudly than instruction would have done. At last he said, the Duchess of Lanford respects courage, but she does not mistake distress for it. Then I must hope to be more than distressed. You already are. She looked out at the lamps passing beyond the window. Do not make me brave before I have survived the evening. His voice lowered. Then survive it as yourself. That will be enough. Lanford House was lit as if scandal had been invited and was expected to admire the chandeliers. Carriages lined the square. Footmen in silver and green livery received cloaks at the entrance, while guests moved through the hall with the alert serenity of people who knew they were present at the beginning of a story that would be repeated by breakfast. The Duchess of Lanford stood near the drawing-room doors, tall, narrow, and magnificent in emerald silk, her white hair arranged beneath diamonds that seemed less decorative than judicial. She greeted Sebastian first with the briefest incline of her head. "Westridge." Then she turned to Cressida and curtsied with perfect correctness. "Your Grace." The words were not warm. They were exact. In that room, exactness was worth more than kindness. Cressida curtsied in return. "Your Grace." The Duchess of Lanford studied her face without pity. "You are younger than rumor has made you and less foolish than several ladies hoped. I shall try not to disappoint the wrong people." One corner of the Duchess's mouth moved. "Good. I dislike wasting a dinner." The first guests nearby heard enough to understand that Cressida had not been received as an embarrassment. The knowledge traveled at once, swift as flame beneath paper. Cressida felt it move around the room. Not acceptance. Not yet. But attention with its teeth drawn back. Dinner had not yet been announced when Lady Octavia arrived. She entered in lavender silk, pale gloves, and sorrow arranged so beautifully upon her face that Cressida almost admired the craftsmanship. Lord Draycott followed at her side. He bowed to the Duchess of Lanford, then to Sebastian, then to Cressida with a look that made courtesy feel like accusation. Lady Octavia approached with both hands extended. "Cressida, my dear child." The room listened while pretending not to. Cressida let her mother take neither hand. "Lady Harrowdean." A pause. It was small. It was devastating. Lady Octavia's eyes cooled. Her smile remained. "How formal we have become in a single day. Marriage often changes forms of address." "Not affection, surely?" "No," Cressida said. "Only the places where affection may be claimed without proof." The Duchess of Lanford opened her fan. Lord Draycott's smile thinned. Lady Octavia recovered, turning slightly so the room could see the pain she had prepared. "You must forgive her. My daughter has endured a morning of considerable confusion. She has always been sensitive, though we have tried not to burden others with it." Sebastian's hand shifted at his side. Cressida saw the movement and, without looking at him, let her fingers brush the air once near her skirt. "Not yet." He stilled. The small obedience gave her courage. "I was not confused this morning," she said. "I was informed too late and decided quickly." "A dangerous combination," Draycott said lightly. "Especially when guided by a poor stranger." A few faces turned. The phrase had been waiting. Of course it had. Lady Octavia lowered her eyes, as if wounded by the indelicacy of a truth she had hoped someone else would speak. Cressida felt heat climb her throat. She could have denied the phrase. She could have explained that Sebastian was not poor, not unknown, not what she had believed. But denial would only let Draycott choose the battlefield. "A choice made in fear can still be more honest than a bargain made in greed," she said. The room quieted. Not dramatically. Society rarely gave a woman the dignity of drama when discomfort would do. But the quiet came, and with it the first clean space Cressida had ever made for herself in public. Lady Octavia's eyes sharpened. Greed is an ugly word for a daughter to bring into company. Then ugly arrangements should not be dressed in beautiful language. The Duchess of Lanford's fan paused. Draycott gave a soft laugh. "His Grace has taught you confidence swiftly." "No," Cressida said. "My mother taught me silence. I am discovering the rest." Sebastian looked at her then, and the restraint in his face almost hurt to see. Pride would have been easier. This was something quieter. Reverence, perhaps, though she did not dare name it. Dinner was announced before Lady Octavia could answer. At table, the Duchess of Lanford placed Cressida where no one could mistake her rank, near enough to the center that every guest had to adjust. Lady Octavia was seated farther down, close enough to be visible and not close enough to rule. That arrangement alone would feed London for 3 days. Conversation began with opera, then the Prince Regent's latest extravagance, then country roads. Each subject circled toward Cressida and away again, testing her. She answered sparingly but not meekly. When a lady asked whether the morning had been romantic, Cressida said, "It was lawful, hurried, and honest in the places where I had power to make it so. When a gentleman wondered whether sudden marriages encouraged unsuitable impulses, the Duchess of Lanford replied before anyone else could, so do long negotiations conducted by creditors. Lady Octavia's fork touched her plate with a tiny sound. Draycott leaned toward Cressida after the second course, his voice pitched low enough to seem private and high enough to be overheard by those who wished to work for it. You defend his grace with admirable loyalty for a lady who knew him so briefly. I defend my own choice. Do you know why he was at Harrowdean before he knew your name? Cressida looked at him. Do you? His eyes flickered. Lady Octavia answered from farther down the table, smooth and too swift. His grace did not come to Harrowdean for your sake alone, Cressida. You must not confuse a gentleman's purpose with devotion. The word slipped into the candlelight and stayed there. Cressida felt them settle. Her mother knew more than she should. Not guessed. Knew. Sebastian's face did not change, but the signet on his hand caught the light as his fingers curled once against the tablecloth. Cressida did not look at him yet. She looked at Lady Octavia. Then perhaps tomorrow I shall learn which purpose frightened you most. Lady Octavia smiled. You are overtired. No, Cressida said. I am listening. The rest of dinner passed with fewer blades shown openly, which made the hidden ones easier to hear. By the time the ladies withdrew, London had received enough fragments to dine upon for a week, but not enough to swallow Cressida whole. In the drawing-room afterward, Sebastian came to her side near a tall window. He did not stand too close. You were courageous, he said. She kept her gaze on the dark glass, where their reflections stood side by side without touching. Do not turn not collapsing into heroism. Then I will say only that you stood. That I will accept. A footman approached with a folded note on a small tray. For her grace. No seal marked it, only her new title written in a hand she did not know. Cressida opened it while Sebastian watched her face, not the paper. Ask your husband why he came to your mother's house before he knew your name. The ink seemed to darken as she read it. She lifted her eyes to Sebastian. This time, his composure broke by one careful fraction. He recognized the trap. The note lay between them in the carriage on the way back to Westridge House, folded once, then opened again, because Cressida had learned that hidden things grew stronger when left in darkness. Ask your husband why he came to your mother's house before he knew your name. Sebastian had read it without touching the paper, his eyes narrowing by the smallest degree. He did not deny it. That was the first thing she marked. He did not explain it. That was the second. You recognize the hand, she asked. No, but you recognize the intention. Yes. The carriage lamps moved across his face as they passed through the London streets, making him appear by turns severe and tired. Then answer the question. Not here. Because the carriage has ears. Because the answer has too many pieces to hand you in a moving box after you have just survived your mother's dinner. Cressida looked out at the dark windows of passing houses. You make concern sound dangerously similar to delay. The word struck. He accepted them in silence. When Westridge House received them, Mrs. Vale waited in the hall with sleepless eyes and a shawl around her shoulders. Cressida gave her the note to keep with the one from Lady Octavia. Sebastian watched this without protest. It was nearly midnight, yet London had not finished with them. By noon the next day, 3 calling cards had arrived, 2 invitations had been declined by Sebastian's hand only after Cressida permitted it, and 1 anonymous scrap was delivered with no seal and no courage. It repeated the phrase that had left her mouth in a chapel courtyard and been stolen by people who preferred a desperate woman to remain desperate forever. I would rather marry a poor stranger. Cressida read it once, then placed it beside the other notes. They mean to make my own words the proof of my foolishness, she said. Sebastian stood across the morning room, his signet ring visible against the dark sleeve of his coat. Draycott means to force the story into society before evidence can answer it. And my mother will weep at the proper intervals. Cressida almost laughed. It would have hurt less than anger. You still owe me the answer. He looked at the notes on the table. I do. And yet tonight will bring the question whether I answer before a room that wants you diminished, or to you when you can use it. You are choosing again. No, he took one step back from the table, as though distance could prove restraint. I am asking whether you will let me answer after all, Max, where I suspect Draycott intends to act. You suspect, or you know? I know his pattern. The shadow in his voice had a name he had not yet given her. Cressida heard it and stored it beside all the other unopened things between them. Very well, she said. But do not mistake my patience for trust. I won't. That evening, Max shone with the pale, polished cruelty of a place that could deny entry more effectively than any prison and call the exclusion taste. Cressida arrived in ivory silk with no jewels except her wedding ring. Mrs. Vale had argued softly for pearls. Cressida refused. She would not enter a room already hungry for spectacle, dressed as though she were begging to be forgiven. Sebastian escorted her through the doors without pressing her hand against his arm. His restraint was visible only to her, which made it more intimate than a public tenderness would have been. The patronesses received them with correct bows and eyes sharpened by entertainment carefully disguised as propriety. Music moved through the rooms, light and relentless. Dancers turned. Fans lifted. Conversation bent toward the Duke and Duchess of Westridge as grass bends beneath wind. Cressida felt the first slip of paper before she saw one. A young lady near the lemonade table read it, flushed, and passed it to an older woman who pretended not to smile. Another scrap crossed from a gentleman's sleeve to a lady's fan. Then one fell near Cressida's shoe. Sebastian saw it at the same moment she did. She bent before he could stop her, picked it up, and opened it. I would rather marry a poor stranger. No context. No fear. No mother's bargain. No Draycott's appetite for her settlement. Just the sentence, stripped and dressed as comedy. The room seemed to tilt, not because she was faint, but because memory had weight. The chapel courtyard came back with its cold stones and rattling gate. She had spoken those words with the last free breath she owned. Now London held them like a ribbon from a torn gown. Your Grace, Sebastian said quietly. Do not. She did not know whether he meant do not read, do not hurt, or do not answer. It did not matter. If anyone wishes to know why I spoke those words, she said, not loudly, but clearly enough for the nearest listeners to still, I am present to answer. A small circle opened around her. Lord Draycott stepped into it as if he had been waiting behind the music. Lady Octavia stood several yards away, one hand pressed to her breast, her face composed into maternal anguish for the benefit of every watching eye. How generous of you, Draycott said. Though one hardly wishes to trouble a lady with explanations she may have been encouraged to provide. Encouraged by whom? Cressida asked. By a husband who entered Harradine House under reduced colours, for reasons no sudden affection can explain. The room's attention sharpened. Draycott had chosen his blade well. His Grace came to your mother's house before he knew your name. He had business there. Papers, perhaps. Settlements. Debts. Then, by extraordinary fortune, he discovered a distressed lady whose marriage to him could make his presence appear chivalrous. Lady Octavia closed her eyes briefly, as if hearing such a thing wounded her too much to bear. Felix, she murmured, though she made no move to stop him. We must not be unkind. No, he said. Only honest. Cressida felt Sebastian change beside her. Not movement. Not yet. A gathering. She knew, with sudden certainty, that he was remembering another woman, another room, another circle of eyes. He had not told her the story, but his silence had become crowded with it. Draycott turned slightly toward the room. I merely ask whether Lady Cressida was rescued from a scheme, or placed at the centre of one she did not understand. Murmur stirred. The phrase found fear in her. Not because it was true, but because part of it was not entirely false. Sebastian had concealed himself. He had come for reasons beyond her. He had held a title behind a glove while she vowed before God and law. Cressida drew breath to answer anyway. She could say what was true and still wound him with it. She could say he had deceived her but her mother had meant to sell her. She could name the difference before the room decided there was none. Enough, Sebastian said. The word cut through the music. Draycott smiled. Lady Octavia looked down as though his intervention proved everything she feared. Cressida turned to Sebastian, but he was already beside her, his face controlled and his hand extended. "We are leaving." "No," she said softly. He did not hear the whole word, or he heard it through fear and mistook fear for wisdom. "This room has had its amusement." His voice remained low, but power traveled through it. The circle parted. Cressida felt every eye follow as he guided her toward the door. He did not drag her. He did not hurt her. That was almost worse. The courtesy of the exit allowed the room to call it protection. She felt her chance close behind her like a door. In the carriage, silence sat between them until Westridge House was no longer visible behind the turn of the square. Sebastian looked at her hands. They were clenched in her lap, not trembling from humiliation, but from the violence of being prevented from answering it. His face changed before she spoke. He understood too late. "Cressida, you did not save me from humiliation," she said. Her voice was calm enough to frighten them both. "You carried me out before I could stand." He closed his eyes for one breath. When he opened them, there was no defense in him. "Yes. My mother calls it care when she removes my choice. Lord Draycott calls it prudence. What shall I call it when you do it?" The question struck deeper than anger. He looked down at the signet ring on his hand, the falcon bright even in the poor carriage light. A failure. She had wanted him to argue. She had wanted resistance she could push against. Instead, the admission left her with the hurt itself. "I thought of another woman," he said. A room turned on her once, and no one stopped it until her name was ruined. "So you stopped mine before I could use it?" "Yes." The carriage wheels rolled over stone. Cressida looked toward the window and saw only her reflection, ivory silk, plain ring, eyes too bright. "Tomorrow," she said, "I begin asking questions without your permission." Sebastian did not look relieved. He looked chastened, and something more difficult than shame moved through his face. Respect, stripped of pride. "Then tomorrow," he said, "I will try to deserve being asked." Morning came to Westridge House with no mercy for women who had not slept. Cressida was dressed before the maid could knock, her ivory gown from Almack's already sent away and a plain walking dress fastened in its place. The notes lay on her writing desk like a little court of accusations. Lady Octavia's command. Drakett's elegant threat. The anonymous scraps from Almack's. The question that had followed her from Lanford House into scandal. "Ask your husband why he came to your mother's house before he knew your name." She read none of them again. She had memorized enough cruelty for one marriage. Instead, she took up her pen and wrote to Mr. Edwin Halcombe, the solicitor who had served her father and whom her mother had always dismissed as tiresome, cautious, and inconveniently faithful to the dead. If Harrowdean House had hidden a truth in paper, Mr. Halcombe might still know where the crease lay. Mrs. Vale entered as Cressida sealed the note. The companion's face showed the kind of worry that had been awake for hours before it found speech. "Your Grace, His Grace asks whether you will breakfast below." "Tell His Grace I am going out." Mrs. Vale did not ask where. She reached for her bonnet. "Then I'm going with you." By the time they reached the foot of the stairs, Sebastian stood in the hall in a dark morning coat, hat and gloves in hand, his signet ring uncovered. He looked as if he had been waiting, but not as if he intended to bar the door. That distinction mattered. "Mr. Halcombe," he said. Cressida stopped. "Have you opened my letters now?" "No. Mrs. Ainsworth gave me the direction you sent to the footman." "And you came to prevent me?" "No," he looked at her directly. "I came to offer the carriage and 2 footmen. Not to report to me. To keep Drakett's people at a distance." "That sounds almost like permission." "Then I have phrased it badly." He accepted the correction without armor. "The carriage is yours if you want it. So are the footmen. I will not ask them a question about what passes unless you instruct me to." Mrs. Vale became very interested in her gloves. Cressida studied Sebastian's face, searching for the old reflex of command and finding only effort restrained before it became one. "1 footman on the box. 1 behind. Neither enters Mr. Halcombe's office unless I call." "Agreed." "You send no note ahead of me." I won't. And when I return, you will not ask as though the answer belongs to you first. That one struck him. She saw it in the tightening near his mouth. Then I shall wait until you choose to tell me. It should not have softened her. It did, a little, which was irritating enough to steady her. Mr. Halcombe's office near Lincoln's Inn smelled of dust, sealing wax, damp wool, and patient paper. The old solicitor rose so quickly from behind his desk that his chair scraped the floor. Lady Cressida, he said, then stopped, pain and respect crossing his face together. Your Grace. Please do not let the title make this harder. His eyes shone. Your father once said the same of rank when it first became troublesome to him. The mention of her father entered the room gently and hurt because it was gentle. Cressida did not sit. I need the Harrowdean papers. Not the copies my mother keeps. The complete ones. Mr. Halcombe looked at Mrs. Vale, then back at Cressida. May I ask why? Because Lord Draycott expected to profit by marrying me. Because my mother knew it. Because last night London repeated my words as if desperation were comedy. The old man's face changed. Not surprise. Confirmation. He unlocked a cabinet behind his desk and drew out a narrow ledger, several folded documents tied with blue tape, and a smaller packet wrapped in linen. Your father tried to protect your portion, he said. Lady Harrowdean requested alterations after his death. I refused what I had power to refuse. And what had you no power to refuse? Debts attached to Harrowdean House were moved through hands not under my supervision. He opened the ledger. Lord Draycott's man of business appears more than once. Cressida looked down. Numbers filled the page, but numbers did not wound her first. Her name did. Lady Cressida Lindham, written beside projected settlement access, as neat and small as if she were not a living woman but a sum to be applied against an account. The room narrowed. She had known her mother intended to bargain with her? Knowing was different from seeing one's name arranged as repayment. Mrs. Vale moved closer, but did not touch her. That kindness nearly undid what the ledger had begun. So I was not merely to be married, Cressida said. I was to be spent. Mr. Halcombe's mouth trembled. Your Grace, I am sorry. Do not be sorry yet. Tell me what else. He opened the linen packet. Inside lay a flattened wafer of dark red wax, hardened and imperfect. A crest had been pressed into it. A falcon above a shield. Cressida knew that bird now with a clarity that made her fingers cold. Westridge. Not the true ring itself, but something meant to resemble it. She bent closer. One wing was wrong. The upper line blurred and broke where Sebastian's signet had been clean. Where did this come from? Among Harrowdean papers sent for review last week. It was wrapped with drafts concerning possible announcements after your betrothal to Lord Draycott. I thought it odd. Now I think it was preparation. Preparation to use His Grace's name. Or the appearance of his authority. A seal could enter rooms a woman could not. A seal could make a lie respectable. Cressida looked at the broken wing until the floor seemed to cut itself into memory. May I take it? With a receipt, and with caution. I have had caution used on me like a chain, Mr. Halcombe. He bowed his head. Then take it as a lantern instead. When Cressida returned to Westridge House, the morning had sharpened into a pale noon. Sebastian was in the morning room, standing by the window with a restraint so visible it seemed almost physical. He turned as she entered. His eyes went first to her face, not to the packet in her hand. Are you hurt? The question was plain enough to disarm a sharper answer. No good. He stopped there, though stopping cost him. Cressida placed the ledger copy and the linen packet on the table. Mrs. Vale remained near the door. My mother hid debts. Draycott expected access to my portion. Mr. Halcombe found this among Harrowdean papers. She unfolded the linen. The flawed wax lay in the light. Sebastian went utterly still. The air around him changed, not with noise, but with cold precision. That is meant to be my seal. But it is not yours. He reached toward his signet ring, then stopped. May I? The question moved through her with an unexpected force. He was asking before touching proof that bore his own crest. Yes. Sebastian removed the ring from his hand and set it on the table, not above the wax, not in possession of the room, but beside it. The act was quiet. Cressida understood it anyway. He was putting power down before using it. The true falcon shone in gold, both wings clean, every feather exact. The wax was a counterfeit shadow, its right wing broken at the tip. Someone copied it badly, he said. Or in haste. Before the marriage, Cressida said. Mr. Halcombe found it among papers prepared for my betrothal to Draycott. His gaze lifted to hers. Then your mother's house and Draycott's circle were preparing to use my authority before you fled. The words should have frightened her. Instead, they gave shape to fear. Shape could be fought. Sebastian drew a breath. Last night, I feared seeing you hurt. I should have feared seeing you silence more. She held his eyes. There was apology in him, but not the soft kind that asked her to comfort the man who offered it. Yes, she said. You should have. I know. He looked at the ring beside the false wax. Name the next course, and I will not overrule it. Before she could answer, a footman appeared at the door with a salver. His face was carefully blank in the way of servants carrying trouble. A letter for her grace. Cressida did not move until Sebastian did not move either. Then she crossed the room and took it herself. The seal was red. The crest pressed into it was Westridge. Cressida held the letter by its edges, as though ink and wax could stain the skin more permanently than blood. The red seal bore the Westridge falcon, or what wanted to be the Westridge falcon, pressed into wax with enough confidence to frighten anyone who had never seen the true ring lying bare upon a table. The morning room seemed to draw inward around that small circle of red. Mrs. Vale stood by the door, one hand at her throat. The footman who had carried the salver kept his eyes lowered, but even his stillness confessed that a great house knew danger when it entered under a crest. Sebastian did not reach for the letter. He did not say it was his. He did not say it was not. He stood across the table from her with the true signet ring still beside the flawed wax impression, and for that restraint alone, Cressida did not break the seal at once in anger. She looked at him instead. If this is yours, she said, do not let me learn it from paper. His face did not change quickly enough to be performance. Pain crossed it first, then understanding. It isn't mine. The denial was quiet. She had heard men deny things before. Draycott denied with Polish. Lady Octavia denied by sounding wounded. Sebastian denied as if he knew the words were not enough. Then I shall read it, Cressida said. Yes. She broke the seal with the paper knife from the table. The wax split cleanly, and the sound seemed too delicate for the cruelty it released. The hand inside had been shaped to seem masculine, brisk, and controlled. It was not Sebastian's exact hand, but it borrowed enough of its discipline to mock the difference. Cressida read the first line and felt the old house of fear open a door inside her. My dear Cressida, what passed between us was done in haste, and I have come to see that my intervention has placed you in a position neither safe nor honorable. It is my wish that you return at once to Lady Harrowdean until a quiet separation can be arranged. I will not oppose such an arrangement if conducted with dignity. Your reputation will be protected as far as circumstances permit. S. Darlin, Westridge. The letter did not shout. It was worse for that. It used the soft language of reason, regret, and dignity, the very language people used when moving a woman out of sight. Return at once. Quiet separation. As far as circumstances permit. Cressida did not believe the words fully, but they found every place where belief had been injured. They found the daughter who had been told that wishes were not resources. They found the bride who had discovered a dukedom after the vows. They found the woman carried out of Almack's before she could answer. She looked down at the signature and felt, for one treacherous second, that perhaps all roads led back to Harrowdean House because no choice made in fear could ever belong to her for long. Cressida, Sebastian said. She folded the letter once along its crease, then opened it again because she refused to hide from the wound while it was still speaking. Did you write this? No. Did you instruct anyone to write it? No. Did you discuss separation with Mr. Ives, Lady Octavia, Lord Draycott, or anyone in this house? No. Did you regret the marriage this morning? He drew a breath. It was the first question that hurt him in a different way. I regretted deceiving you. I regretted silencing you. I did not regret marrying you. The answer entered the room and did not ask to be believed by sentiment alone. Cressida wanted to accept it. That frightened her. You understand why I must ask? I do. You understand why a denial is not proof? I do. Sebastian looked at the table, where the true ring and the wax from Mr. Halcombe's office waited side by side. Let the seal answer what my word cannot. He did not move until she nodded. Then he lifted the torn portion of wax from the letter and held it near the window. May I bring the ring closer? Yes. He took the signet ring from the table and set it near the broken seal without pressing it into his palm. Gold and wax faced one another beneath the pale noon light. At first, the forged crest seemed close enough to pass. A falcon. A shield. The old authority of a ducal house. Then Cressida saw the flaw. The right wing broke near the upper feather. Not blurred by age, not softened by travel, but incomplete in precisely the same place as the wax impression from Harrodine papers. Sebastian placed the two false marks together. The broken wing matched. The true ring did not. Its falcon was whole, every feather clean, as exact as accusation. The same defect, Cressida said. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. Yes. The seal from Mr. Halcombe's packet and this letter came from the same copy. Or from the same false matrix. Prepared before I fled. Very likely. A knock came at the door, too careful to be ordinary. Mrs. Ainsworth entered with composure held so tightly it looked painful. Your Grace, she said to Cressida, Lady Harrodine's carriage is outside. Mrs. Vale made a small sound. Cressida did not turn at once. She stared at the forged letter as if it might reveal another line, one that said cruelty had grown tired and would stop of its own accord. Outside now, she asked. Yes, Your Grace. The coachman says he was instructed to wait. Sebastian's face hardened, but he did not speak over her. Cressida walked to the window. Beyond the iron railings, Lady Octavia's carriage stood at the curb, dark, glossy, and patient, as if it had arrived by appointment with obedience itself. The horses shifted in their traces. A groom looked toward the house with the boredom of a man who expected a lady to be delivered when called for. The timing completed the letter more brutally than the signature had done. Her mother's carriage had arrived before Cressida could have answered, before a message could have crossed London, before any honest concern could have taken form. Lady Octavia had known what the forged letter would command because the command was hers, or Drakett's, or both. Cressida turned from the window. The fear inside her had changed. It no longer ran in all directions. It had found a target. She meant me to return as a discarded wife, she said. Yes, Sebastian answered. Not dragged. Not begged. Delivered by your supposed regret. Yes. And then London would be told I had been rescued from my own foolishness. Yes. The word was quiet, but his anger had gone cold enough to make the room feel sharpened. Mrs. Ainsworth, Cressida said. Tell the coachman Lady Harrodine's carriage may return without me. The housekeeper curtsied. At once, Your Grace. And if he refuses to leave? Cressida looked at the forged seal, then at the true ring. Tell him the Duchess of Westridge receives no summons disguised as concern. Mrs. Ainsworth's eyes warmed by the smallest fraction. Yes, Your Grace. When the door closed, Sebastian looked at Cressida with an expression she could not name quickly. It was not gratitude alone. It was not relief. It was the expression of a man who had been offered a chance to be answered by evidence instead of forgiven by weakness. You came to me with the question, he said. I came to the room where the lie was standing, Cressida replied. Do not make me nobler than I am. I won't. His voice softened. But I will remember that you asked before you obeyed the wound. That struck too near the truth. She looked away because tears would have rewarded too many enemies. I nearly obeyed it. Nearly is not obedience. She held the forged letter until the paper bent under her fingers. My mother knows the shape of every fear she made in me. Then we shall make her answer to people who know the shape of proof. Cressida looked back at him. The poor stranger had been false. The Duke had been hidden. The man before her was still unfinished, which made him more believable than either disguise. "Not quietly," she said. "No, not with you speaking for me." No, he placed the true signet ring on the table between them, beside the broken seals. "Someone copied my falcon," he said, "but not well enough." Cressida looked at the missing feather in wax, then at the whole bird in gold. "Then we shall make them answer for the broken wing." By the time Lady Harrowdene's carriage rolled away from the square, Westridge House had grown so quiet that the departure sounded less like wheels over stone than the first crack in a locked door. Cressida remained beside the morning room table, one hand resting near the forged letter, the other closed around the edge of her skirt to steady herself without looking as if she required steadying. Sebastian had sent no one after the carriage. He had ordered no dramatic pursuit, no challenge, no immediate summons that would allow anger to run ahead of proof. Instead, he stood across from her with the true signet ring, the false wax, and the counterfeit letter arranged between them, every mark of authority reduced to evidence. "There was another woman," he said. Cressida lifted her eyes. The words did not surprise her. Something in his silence since Almack's had already contained a ghost. "The one you remembered in the ballroom?" "Yes." He placed both hands on the back of a chair, then released it, as if even furniture should not be gripped too hard while he spoke of a woman who had been given no such restraint. "Miss Amabel Trewin. A gentleman's daughter. Not rich enough to be safe, not poor enough to be pitied. Her father died with debts, and her guardians wanted a marriage that would close every mouth before it opened." Cressida looked down at her own name in Mr. Halcombe's copied ledger. Draycott. He courted her long enough to learn the settlement, the weak guardian, and the aunt who feared scandal more than hunger. His man of business persuaded them that certain funds should be moved through an investment attached to one of his creditors. The money vanished. Draycott withdrew with sorrow. Miss Trewin was called imprudent. The last word held more bitterness than all the rest. Cressida felt no theatrical shock. She felt something colder. Recognition. "He does not merely take money," she said. "He arranges the room so the woman seems to have handed it to him." "Yes." "And you could not prove it." "Not enough." Her guardians wanted silence. Her aunt wanted shelter. Miss Trewin wanted no more eyes upon her. He looked at the forged seal. Men like Draycott do not survive by hiding every crime. They survive by making each truth too humiliating for the victim to carry into daylight. The sentence struck the table like a weight. Cressida thought of Almack's, of slips of paper bearing her stolen words, of the circle opening around her so everyone might watch the poor stranger's bride explain herself. "That is why you carried me out." "It is why I told myself I carried you out." His voice roughened, then steadied. "The truth is less generous. I saw the room turning and thought of Miss Trewin. I feared the same cruelty. Then I used my rank to remove you from the place where you had chosen to speak. And my mother taught you nothing by example. She should have." He accepted the wound without flinching. "I am ashamed that fear made me resemble the thing I despised. That should have satisfied some part of her. It did not. Satisfaction was too simple for grief." Cressida moved to the chair, but did not sit. "Why did you come to Harrowdene before you knew my name?" "Because Draycott's man of business had touched Harrowdene papers. Mr. Ives traced a pattern of debts and proposed settlement access. I went in plain dress and under the family name Arlen because rank makes liars careful." He looked at the ring on the table. "Men flatter it. Women are warned against defending it. Mothers sell daughters toward it. A duke in a room hears nothing except what people decide a duke should hear. So you became a man they would underestimate." "Yes. And you underestimated what your disguise would cost the woman who believed it." "Yes." Cressida breathed in slowly. The answer was bare, and bare answers left fewer places for anger to hook itself. Truth gathered by deception can still wound the innocent. "It has wounded you. Do not make me the whole moral lesson. That is another way of centering yourself." The faintest, pained breath left him. "You are right. I know." The words came before courtesy could soften them. For the first time that morning, something almost like humor passed between them, delicate and gone at once. Sebastian removed his signet ring and placed it in the center of the table. Not on his hand. Not raised toward the light. Set down. The falcon faced upward, whole and silent. Name the course you choose, he said, and I will not overrule it. Cressida looked at the ring, then at the forged letter. No quiet arrangement. No ballroom performance where gossip can turn fact into sport. Agreed. No solicitors' exchange so private that my mother may continue calling herself wounded and Lord Draycott may continue calling himself misled. Then witnesses. He did not sound triumphant. Only ready. Chosen witnesses, she said. A room where my mother believes she can still command the air. Your drawing room, because she will come to it if she thinks family dignity may be preserved. Not too many people. Enough that no one can pretend not to have heard. Sebastian's eyes sharpened, but he did not take the plan from her. The Duchess of Lanford. Yes. She saw enough last night to understand the taste of the lie. Mr. Ives. Of course. Sir Roland Merwick, Sebastian said. He served with your father on a charitable board. He is stubborn, titled enough to be heard, and your mother has disliked him for years. Then he is useful. Two matrons whose memories are dull but accurate. Exactly. Cressida glanced toward the door. Mrs. Vale will be present. As your witness. As the woman who followed me when rank had not yet changed my name. He bowed his head. Yes. The respect in the word unsettled her because it asked nothing in return. She folded the forged letter and set it beside the wax impression. My mother will say I am unnatural. Likely. Draycott will say I am guided by you. Likely. Then you must not guide me. Sebastian looked at the signet ring lying between them. I will stand beside you. Not before me. Not before you. If you forget. Tell me to move. In front of everyone. Especially then. She held his gaze. There was danger in believing a promise from a man who had already deceived her. There was also danger in refusing to recognize when a man was trying to change. Cressida had lived too long among people who called control love. She would not mistake accountability for weakness. Very well. The words were small, yet they altered the room. Sebastian reached for paper and ink from the writing desk, then paused before sitting. Do you wish to write the invitations yourself? No. They must come from Westridge House, or my mother will suspect I have more courage than Trap. His mouth moved almost into a smile. Your mother has often underestimated both. Do not flatter me into forgiving you. I won't. But you may write. He sat and took up the pen. Cressida stood near enough to read, far enough not to seem overseen. The first invitation went to the Duchess of Lanford, formal, cool, and impossible to refuse. The second to Sir Roland. The third to Lady Mereworth and Mrs. Penrith, both respectable enough to carry a story without embellishing it into nonsense. Mr. Ives would be summoned separately with the papers. At last Sebastian began the note to Lady Octavia. The preservation of family dignity, he murmured. Cressida looked at him. That is bait. It is also what she believes herself to be protecting. No. She protects authority. Dignity merely wears better gloves. This time he did smile, briefly and without amusement. Then we shall let her arrive gloved. He sanded the letter, folded it, and reached for his signet ring. Before pressing it into the red wax, he looked at Cressida. Shall I use another seal? The question touched the place where the forged letter had struck. Cressida looked at the falcon, then at the broken wing in wax. No. Use the true one. Let tomorrow begin with the difference. Sebastian pressed the ring into the wax and lifted it cleanly. The falcon appeared whole, every feather sharp. A footman entered and received the letters with a bow. As the door closed, Cressida imagined Lady Octavia opening the invitation, reading the promise of family dignity, and believing that her daughter had finally been frightened into negotiation. Sebastian stood beside her, not touching. She will think you are surrendering. Good, Cressida said. Then let her come. By 4 o'clock the next afternoon, Westridge House had been arranged not for hospitality, but for truth. The drawing-room looked almost unchanged to anyone who had not learned to read battle in the placement of chairs. The fire burned low. The curtains were drawn back to admit the grey London light. A round table stood near the windows, polished until it reflected the objects laid upon it with merciless clarity. The forged letter rested beside the broken wax seal. Mr. Halcombe's written statement lay folded beneath a ribbon. The ledger extract waited with Cressida's name visible enough to wound and prove in the same glance. Beside it sat the wax impression from Harrodine papers, wrapped in linen but not hidden. One space remained empty at the center of the table. That space belonged to the true signet ring. Cressida stood in her chamber while Mrs. Vale fastened the last button at her wrist. She had chosen a grey silk gown, plain enough not to plead and fine enough not to apologize. On her left hand she wore her wedding ring. On her right she wore the glove torn at Harrodine and mended by Mrs. Vale with small, careful stitches. The seam was visible. That was the point. Another glove would sit more smoothly, Mrs. Vale said. Yes, Cressida answered. But this one remembers accurately. Mrs. Vale's eyes filled, though her hands did not falter. Then let them see what it remembers. When Cressida entered the drawing-room, Sebastian was already there, standing near the evidence table in black evening dress despite the afternoon hour. His signet ring remained on his hand. He looked at her glove, then at her face, and whatever he felt, he kept it from becoming pity. "Where do you wish me?" he asked. The question reached her before any title could. "Beside me," she said. "Not between me and the room. Beside you." He took his place accordingly, close enough to support and far enough to obey. The witnesses arrived with punctual gravity. The Duchess of Lanford came first, emerald silk exchanged for dark plum, her fan closed like a judge's seal. She studied the table, then Cressida. "You have arranged this well." "I have arranged it so no one may pretend confusion." "Ambitious," the Duchess said. "I approve." "Mr. Ives followed with his leather folder and a face so sober that even gossip would have hesitated before interrupting him. Sir Roland Merwick came next, white-haired, broad-shouldered, and grim, leaning on a cane he appeared ready to use against nonsense rather than weakness. Lady Mereworth and Mrs. Penrith arrived together, two matrons of impeccable reputation and limited invention, which made them perfect. Mrs. Vale took her place near Cressida, not as a servant, not quite as a guest, but as the woman who had walked through the chapel courtyard before rank made loyalty fashionable. Sebastian removed the true signet ring from his finger. He did not place it on the table until Cressida inclined her head. Then the gold falcon entered the empty space at the center, whole-winged and silent. At 4:30, Lady Octavia Lindom entered Westridge House as if entering a room had always meant owning it. She wore lavender silk, pale gloves, and an expression of injured patience. Lord Draycott followed in dark blue, handsome, polished, and alert. He saw the witnesses before he saw the evidence. His smile did not disappear, but it had to work harder to remain. Lady Octavia came forward with both hands slightly extended. "Cressida, my dear. I had hoped this would be private." "So had you," Cressida said. A stillness passed through the room. The Duchess of Lanford opened her fan. Lady Octavia's eyes cooled by a degree, but her voice remained soft. "Family dignity is rarely served by spectacle. Then we must be careful not to mistake witnesses for spectacle." Draycott bowed toward Sebastian. "Your Grace, I trust this gathering will not encourage further distress in her Grace." Sebastian did not answer. He looked at Cressida, and the room saw that he waited. Draycott saw it too. It irritated him. Cressida moved to the evidence table. "I asked you here because a letter was sent to me under what appeared to be the Westridge seal." Lady Octavia's hand rose gently to her breast. "A letter from your husband." "A letter claiming to be from my husband." "Claiming?" Draycott repeated with an elegant lift of his brows. "A seal is an impressive claim. Not always an honest one." Cressida unfolded the forged letter and laid it flat. "This letter instructed me to return to Harrodine House until a quiet separation could be arranged. Before I had opened it, your carriage was already waiting outside Westridge House." Lady Octavia's sorrow sharpened into caution. A mother may anticipate distress. A mother may. A coachman requires orders. The Duchess of Lanford's fan paused. Sir Rowland leaned forward slightly. Cressida did not look away from Lady Octavia. How did your carriage know to wait before any answer could have reached you? Instinct is not bound by the clock, my dear. No. But horses are. Lady Mereworth looked down quickly, perhaps to hide a reaction. Draycott gave a soft laugh. Surely we are not to make a conspiracy of maternal concern and well-timed wheels. Not by themselves, Cressida said. That is why they are not by themselves. Mr. Ives stepped forward at her nod and opened his folder. I hold a statement from Mr. Edwin Halcombe, solicitor to the late Earl of Harrowdean. He confirms that certain Harrowdean papers, transmitted for review before any lawful betrothal to Lord Draycott, included references to Lady Cressida's marriage portion and to obligations associated with Harrowdean debts. Lady Octavia's mouth tightened. Old papers are often misunderstood by those eager to wound their mothers. Mr. Halcombe also confirms, Mr. Ives continued, unmoved, that among those papers was discovered a wax impression resembling the Westridge seal. He unfolded the linen and exposed the flawed wax. Lady Octavia looked at it for less than a second and too long. Cressida saw both. Draycott barely looked at all, which told her something different. I have never seen that object, Lady Octavia said. Many things pass through a household office. Debts, for example, Sir Rowland said. Lady Octavia turned her gaze upon him. Sir Rowland, you have grown severe with age. No, madam. Only less entertained by fraud. The word entered the room like a door opening onto cold air. Draycott's smile thinned. A harsh term for incomplete understanding. Cressida lifted the ledger extract. Lord Draycott, did your man of business, Mr. Pell, have dealings connected to Harrowdean obligations? Men of business have dealings everywhere. That is their purpose. Did you expect access to my marriage portion after a betrothal was announced? He looked at Lady Octavia. It was quick. Not quick enough. I expected nothing improper. That was not my question. Lady Octavia intervened smoothly. Cressida, you cannot understand the arrangements required to secure a young woman's future. Your portion was always to be settled properly. Was it to be settled for my protection or for Harrowdean's creditors? Those matters are not as separate as innocence imagines. Cressida felt the answer pass through her like a final signature. Then you knew. Lady Octavia's face hardened beneath the maternal mask. I knew my daughter required a future. I knew Lord Draycott offered rank, connection, and stability. I knew your father had left matters in a condition that forced practical decisions. And I was one of them. No one spoke. The silence gave Cressida more than agreement could have done. Draycott rose halfway from his chair, then seemed to remember the witnesses and settled back with disdain. This is an emotional construction built from scraps. A carriage, a ledger notation, an old lady's memory, and a wax mark no one can authenticate. If His Grace regrets anything, perhaps it is allowing his bride to be guided into accusations before she understands consequence. Sebastian's hand moved near the back of his chair. Cressida lifted 2 fingers, barely. He stopped. The Duchess of Lanford's eyes gleamed. Draycott noticed, and anger flickered under his polish. You think silence proves virtue? Cressida asked him. I think restraint proves judgment. Then you have mistaken performance for character. His face changed. Only for an instant. But it was enough for everyone close enough to see. Lady Octavia stood. This has gone beyond decency. No, Cressida said. It has only reached it. Mr. Ives placed the forged letter beside the wax impression. The broken wing showed poorly in the afternoon light, but the flaw was there, waiting. Lady Octavia drew herself up. You are being used, Cressida. Even now, His Grace lets you speak because it serves him. Cressida looked at Sebastian. He stood beside her, silent, the full force of his rank held back because she had asked it of him. No, she said. He lets me speak because I required it. There is a difference. Draycott gave a brittle laugh. A touching distinction. Yet no one can prove the seal was false. At last Sebastian rose. He did not step before Cressida. He moved beside her to the table, took up the true signet ring, and turned the gold falcon toward the candlelight. The gold caught the candlelight and answered Lord Draycott more cleanly than any speech could have done. In Sebastian's hand, the Westridge falcon rose from the signet with both wings whole, 7 feathers cut along the right wing in a line so sharp that even age had not softened it. He placed the ring on the table beside the forged letter, then turned the broken seal toward the same flame. "The Westridge falcon has 7 feathers on the right wing," he said. His voice was quiet enough to make the room lean toward it. "This seal has 6. Lady Mereworth forgot to hide her interest. Mrs. Penrith rose half an inch from her chair. Sir Roland crossed the carpet with slow, deliberate steps and bent over the table. He looked first at the ring, then at the wax on the letter, then at the impression from Harrowdean papers. "The defect is the same," he said. "Not wear. Not accident. A copy made from the same faulty source." Mr. Ives opened his folder and set down a narrow paper. "The marriage between His Grace and Her Grace is valid beyond the reach of this forged letter. The document has no legal force. Its importance lies elsewhere." He turned the page toward the witnesses. It attempted to use His Grace's authority to command Her Grace's return to Harrowdean House. The room changed. It had been tense before. Now it became exact. Lady Octavia's face remained pale and beautiful, but the beauty had lost its ease. Draycott looked at the wax as if contempt alone might melt it into irrelevance. "A defective seal proves only that some fool has poor tools," he said. "It doesn't prove my hand." "No one accused your hand first," Cressida replied. "You have done that yourself by listening for it." His eyes snapped to hers. A faint murmur moved through the room and died beneath the Duchess of Lanford's fan. Lady Octavia lifted her chin. "Cressida, you forget that you are speaking to a gentleman." "No," Cressida said. "I remember very clearly what gentlemen have been allowed to call themselves." Sebastian remained beside her. "Not before. Not over." The restraint traveled through her like strength borrowed without debt. Cressida touched the forged letter. "This letter told me His Grace regretted the marriage and wished me to return to you, Mamma. Your carriage waited outside Westridge House before I had opened it. Mr. Halcombe found the matching wax impression among Harrowdean papers before any betrothal to Lord Draycott was announced. Those same papers referred to my portion and Harrowdean obligations." She looked from her mother to Draycott. "One fact may be dismissed. For facts make a road." Sir Roland took up the ledger extract. "And this road leads toward money." Lady Octavia turned on him. "Sir Roland, you presume too much." "Madam, I have presumed too little for too many years." He tapped the paper with one broad finger. "These entries show obligations tied to Harrowdean creditors through Mr. Pell, man of business to Lord Draycott. They also show projected access to Lady Cressida's marriage portion." "Projected," Draycott said. "Not taken. Not promised. Projected by some clerk who perhaps enjoys fiction as much as Her Grace." Cressida looked at him steadily. "Did Mr. Pell act for you?" "On occasion." "Did you know Harrowdean had debts?" "Most old houses have debts." "Did you expect my portion to settle any of them?" He smiled. "I expected a proper marriage settlement." "That is not an answer." "It's the answer a lady receives when she asks a question better suited to men of business." The insult landed exactly where he intended it. A week ago, Cressida might have bled quietly beneath it. Today she heard the desperation under the polish. "Then let us ask the men of business," she said. Mr. Ives read from Mr. Halcombe's statement, his voice even and pitiless. He confirmed Lady Octavia's requests after the late Earl's death, the resisted alterations, the Harrowdean debts, the appearance of Mr. Pell, and the wax impression found among papers meant for proposed marriage announcements. He did not embellish. Facts did not need perfume. When he finished, Lady Octavia stood with the grave elegance of a woman who had decided to treat truth as rudeness. "I will not sit while my daughter parades family hardship before strangers." Cressida felt the old pull of shame. It reached for her, familiar and practiced. Then she saw Mrs. Vale near the wall, eyes bright, standing exactly where she had stood when Cressida had first chosen to leave. Cressida did not look away from her mother. "You paraded me before Lord Draycott as the answer to that hardship. I fed you, clothed you, protected you, and kept your name clean." Lady Octavia's voice shook now, not with grief, but with rage denied its natural volume. "You repay me by making yourself a public accusation." "A roof is not ownership," Cressida said. The room went utterly still. Shelter does not give a mother the right to sell the woman beneath it. Lady Octavia's lips parted. For once, no answer arrived quickly enough to save her. Draycott rose. "This has become indecent." "Sit down, Lord Draycott," Cressida said. The command surprised even her. It did not sound borrowed from Sebastian. It sounded like the voice she would have had if no one had trained her to lower it. Draycott stared. "I beg your pardon." "No, you don't." The Duchess of Lanford's fan closed with a crisp sound. Draycott's colour changed. He looked toward Sebastian, as if expecting the Duke to rebuke his wife for boldness. Sebastian's face remained calm. "You heard her Grace." That was all. It was enough. Draycott sat, and the humiliation of obedience passed over his face before he could cover it. Sir Roland folded the ledger sheet. "I shall review all trustee obligations tied to Lady Cressida's portion and Harrodine accounts. No further settlement expectation will be entertained without scrutiny. Mr. Ives added, proper notices will be sent to the relevant creditors making clear that Her Grace's marriage portion is not, and never was, available to satisfy informal expectations attached to Lord Draycott's suit." Draycott's mouth tightened. "You would damage a man's credit on implication." "No," Sebastian said at last, and every title in the room seemed to stand behind the single word. "On documents." Draycott looked at him with open hatred now. The mask had cracked. "You entered Harrodine under false colors and now preach honor." "Yes," Sebastian said. "I concealed rank to hear what rank would have silenced. I have answered for that to my wife. You concealed debt, intent, and forgery to take what was not yours." He stepped no closer. He did not need to. "You will answer to more than this room." The Duchess of Lanford rose, her dark plum skirts falling with regal severity. "You may begin with mine, Lord Draycott. You will not be received where my recommendation carries weight. Nor will I commend your name to any family with a daughter, a niece, or a fortune within reach." Lady Mereworth and Mrs. Penrith exchanged the glance of women who understood that they had just been handed a story society would not dare improve. Draycott's face went white around the mouth. Social ruin did not always arrive with a shout. Sometimes it came in a duchess's refusal to open a door. Lady Octavia turned to the Duchess of Lanford. "Surely you do not mean to punish a mother for seeking security." "I mean to remember which mothers confuse security with sale," the Duchess replied. "And I mean to dine accordingly." The blow landed. Lady Octavia had feared poverty, scandal, and loss of control. But exclusion from rooms where control was manufactured struck the deepest. Cressida saw it, and pity tried to rise. Not forgiveness. Not weakness. A daughter's old ache for the mother who might have existed if power had not consumed her. Lady Octavia seized that softness with one last attempt. "Cressida," she said, her voice lowered. "You have chosen your husband over your mother." Cressida looked at Sebastian. He did not claim the victory. He did not reach for her. He waited. She turned back. "No. I have chosen truth over fear." Lady Octavia flinched as if the words had crossed a distance no daughter should travel. Then her face closed. "Then keep your truth, your grace." The title was meant as a curse. It arrived as recognition. Draycott stood again, this time with the brittle dignity of a man retreating because every forward road had closed. "I congratulate you all on a most instructive entertainment." "Entertainment requires applause," the Duchess of Lanford said. "You will find none here." He bowed too sharply and left. Lady Octavia followed more slowly. At the door, she looked back once, not at Sebastian, not at the witnesses, but at Cressida's mended glove. For the first time, she seemed to see not the daughter she had controlled, but the damage she had failed to hide. She said nothing. The door closed behind her. The room remained still after they had gone, because justice, when it finally arrived, did not know at once what to do with the space cruelty had occupied. Mrs. Vale crossed to Cressida and touched the mended glove, one brief press of fingers over stitches. It held, she whispered. Cressida swallowed. So did I. The Duchess of Lanford came next. Do not let anyone tell you this was luck, she said. Luck is what fools name when a woman has prepared herself to survive. So Roland bowed over Cressida's hand with old-fashioned gravity. Your father would have been proud. That almost broke what the room had not. Cressida held herself still until the witnesses departed, each carrying a portion of the truth into London by proper channels and very improper whispers. Mr. Ives took the forged letter and wax impression into custody. Sir Roland took copies of the trustee papers. By dusk, only Cressida and Sebastian remained in the drawing-room, the table bare except for the true signet ring. Sebastian picked it up, then stopped before putting it on. You took the room, he said. You gave me room to take it, she answered. Not the same thing. No, for once, the difference did not hurt. He slid the ring onto his finger and looked toward the windows, where London's lamps had begun to glow. There is one more choice. Cressida turned to him. The day had entered her, but not weakened her. What choice? Caldermere Park. My estate. You may come as Duchess of Westridge, with every honor due to you. Or you may come as my guest, with Mrs. Vale, free to leave when you wish. No household will be told to expect anything you have not chosen. The offer stood between them, quieter than rescue and more dangerous to her heart. Cressida looked toward the door through which her mother had gone. No one stood there ordering her back. No one waited with a carriage. I will come, she said. Not because I must. Sebastian's expression changed with a restraint that made it more tender, not less. No, he said. Because you choose. Caldermere Park came into view near the end of a pale winter afternoon, when the sky had softened to pearl and the fields on either side of the road lay quiet beneath a silver mist. Cressida had expected grandeur, because dukes were expected to possess it, but she had not expected steadiness. The house rose from a sweep of brown parkland and dark winter trees, built of warm stone that seemed to have absorbed more years than pride. It did not glitter as London glittered. It endured. The carriage slowed along the curving drive, and Cressida watched the long windows catch the last light. Mrs. Vale rode in the second carriage with the trunks, though she had argued against separation until Cressida promised that an hour alone with silence was not the same as loneliness. Sebastian sat opposite Cressida, his hat beside him, his gloved hand resting near the window strap, his signet ring hidden for warmth rather than secrecy now. During the journey he had not filled the space with explanations of tenants, acres, or lineage. He had asked whether she wished the blinds raised, whether the pace troubled her, whether she preferred the household assembled formally or received in quieter fashion. Each question was small, and because it was small, she trusted it more. Harradine House had specialized in great decisions presented after they had been made. Caldermere began with whether she wanted the curtains open. When the carriage stopped before the broad entrance, Sebastian descended first, then turned and offered his hand. He did not take hers until she placed it fully in his palm. Ready? He asked. Cressida looked at the open doors, the stone steps, the servants gathered beneath the portico, and the life waiting without demanding a performance from her yet. No, she said. But I'm willing. The answer moved through his face with a tenderness so restrained it did not frighten her. That is better than readiness. He led her up the steps and stopped beside her rather than before her. An older butler bowed deeply. A housekeeper with kind eyes curtsied beside him. Mrs. Ainsworth had come from London to assist the transition and stood a little behind them, watchful and composed. Your Grace, the butler said. I am Mr. Bain. Caldermere Park welcomes you home. Home. The word entered Cressida carefully, as if aware it had no right to rush. She had lived beneath fine roofs all her life, but Harradine had received her like an obligation and displayed her like property. This house, through an old servant's formal voice, offered the word without asking whether she had earned it by silence. Thank you, Mr. Bain, she said. His eyes flickered with surprise that she knew his name. Then warmth followed, swift and controlled. Cressida noticed. She intended to notice. The hall beyond was panelled in dark oak and warmed by a great fire, its air scented with cedar, beeswax, and coal smoke. Portraits watched from the walls with the stern patience of ancestors who had never needed to be agreeable. Sebastian followed her gaze. They look severe because they were, he said quietly. Most of them considered affection an alarming French influence. Cressida looked at a powdered duchess whose expression could have frozen soup. Then I shall try not to inherit everything. Please don't. The contraction escaped him with such human ease that she glanced at him, and for one moment the Duke was simply a man relieved to see her mouth soften. A footman approached with a silver tray. Upon it lay a heavy ring of household keys, old iron, and polished brass gathered together in a weight that looked both practical and ceremonial. Mr. Bain lifted the tray toward Sebastian. Sebastian took the keys, then turned to Cressida. The hall waited. Servants knew the old ritual. A duchess entered. Keys were placed in her hand. Authority transferred in silence. But Sebastian did not follow the ritual blindly. These are yours by position, he said, his voice pitched for her, not the room. Yet I won't place them in your hand as if possession and readiness are the same. Do you want them now? The quiet question carried farther than a command would have done. Cressida thought of Lady Octavia placing duties before her and calling them gratitude. She thought of Lord Draycott counting her portion before he had earned her name. She thought of a forged letter trying to return her to the cage by borrowing the authority of this house. Then she held out her hand. Yes, she said. I want to learn what they open. Sebastian placed the keys in her palm. Their weight was real. Not a shackle. Not a triumph. A trust. The household bowed, and this time being honored did not make her feel displayed. Later, after rooms had been shown and Mrs. Vale had inspected Cressida's chamber with the fierce suspicion of a loyal companion, Sebastian asked whether she would walk to the estate chapel before dark. The path led through clipped winter boxwood and bare rose canes cut low for spring. Cold air sharpened Cressida's breath. The chapel stood small and old beyond the west lawn, its stone walls mottled with time, its narrow windows holding the last amber of the day. Inside, there were no guests, no mother at the door, no clergyman waiting with lawful questions, no solicitor guarding the register. Only two people, an altar, and a silence that did not demand haste. Cressida walked to the front and turned. Sebastian remained several steps away, as if the distance itself were part of the apology he was still learning how to live. We are already married, she said. Yes. So this is not necessary. No, then why bring me here? His gaze moved once to the small altar, then returned to her. Because the chapel in London gave you legality under pursuit. I wanted this one to offer choice without anyone at the gate. The answer settled between them slowly. Cressida touched the household keys through the fabric of her reticule. And if I cannot promise what a wife is expected to promise? Then don't. His voice was low. Promise only what is true. The last guarded chamber inside her did not open fully, but the latch loosened. I will not pretend the deception did not wound me. I would not ask it. I will not confuse gratitude with trust. No, and if you decide for me again because fear puts on the coat of protection, I will not be gentle merely because you meant well. A faint breath left him, almost a laugh and almost pain. I should deserve very little gentleness in that case. She studied him in the fading chapel light. What will you promise? Sebastian removed his glove and looked at the signet ring on his hand. This ring hid power from you. Then another person used its likeness to forge control over you. From this day, I will not use the authority it gives me to close a door you have not chosen closed. He lifted his eyes. Truth before shelter. Counsel before command. Your voice before my rank. And when I fail, I will not call your anger ingratitude. Cressida felt the words enter the part of her that had once believed love must be proved by obedience. Then I promise this, she said. I will not stay because you rescued me, or because your name shields mine. I will stay while this marriage gives me room to remain myself. His expression changed, very quietly. And if I learn to love you as yourself? The words were restrained, almost too gentle to be called a declaration, but they seemed to fill the little chapel. Cressida felt warmth rise beneath the ache of everything that had brought them there. "Then I may learn to believe you," she said. "Not quickly." "I don't ask quickly." "Good." She offered her hand. He took it with a care that made no claim beyond the moment. No bells rang. No witnesses approved. Yet something more difficult than legality passed between them and remained. That evening, in the estate study, Cressida wrote her first household letter as Duchess of Westridge. It concerned repairs to the west servant stair, fair wages for 2 under-housemaids, warm cloaks for the stable boys before the deeper cold, and a small discretionary fund under Mrs. Ainsworth's care for emergencies that should not require humiliation before help. Sebastian read it only after she handed it to him. "You begin with the parts of the house guests do not see," he said. "A house reveals its conscience there." He looked at her as if she had given him a country he had inherited but never fully understood. "May I seal it?" Cressida looked at the signet ring. The falcon had been a secret, then a wound, then a lie, then proof. Now it waited for its final use of the day. "Not alone," she said. Sebastian held the ring above the warm red wax. Cressida placed her hand over his. Together, they pressed the crest down. When they lifted the ring, the falcon appeared whole, every feather clear, wings unbroken above the shield. Cressida rested her fingertips beside the seal and smiled because the mark no longer sent her back to fear. Beneath her hand, the falcon opened forward.